everybody, and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. For today's video, we are going to be mapping out what the Ethereum ETF means for the long-term price discovery of Ethereum this cycle, and really what altcoins are going to see the biggest advantage and the most price discovery once this move takes place. I firmly believe that we are going to see more profit generated inside of the altcoins than ever before, and it's all going to be fueled around these ETF approvals. I'm going to be sharing with you guys 3 of my favorite ecosystems and then a few altcoins inside of them that I think are going to make some of us the most profit when this market cycle takes off. Guys, if you find any value in this video, please do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, and if you do want to see anything I'm investing in long term, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. Right off the bat, guys, I wanted to start with this chart because this has me extremely excited about what is to come with Ethereum. Now, a lot of people are going to just brush this off. They're going to assume that it's just impossible, but we are talking about a number of factors that we've never had in any of our prior bull markets, and the driver of this value is going to be the ETFs. With these approvals, we're going to see billions of dollars rushing to buy these. The good news is as people buy Ethereum, they're going to be buying it through TradeFi, right? So it's not like it's going to be clogging up the chain. So I think that Ethereum itself isn't going to have quite the same issues with the gas fees. They're still going to be bad. It still is going to have those same issues. I'm not saying that those are fixed by any means. I'm just saying that as the prices are going up, it's not going to be going up as much as, you know, if we were only participating on this stuff on chain. And so when I'm looking at this, I've seen so many of these prior market cycles play out in the same sort of ways. When we're looking at the long-term basis, once they go into these new all-time highs, we see these massive moves into price discovery. And I'm not going to be the least bit surprised to see this next market cycle for Ethereum play out in this way, where ETH ends up peaking all the way up here around $20,000 to even $25,000. That to me is the realistic price target for Ethereum going into this cycle. And as this happens, it's all going to be fueled around this ETF. There's going to be so much adoption taking place to any of the ERC20 tokens built on Ethereum, and not only the tokens built on Ethereum, but any of the tokens that are ultimately looking to scale Ethereum, whether it's a layer 2 or whether it's a liquid staking type of project. LDO is a good example of this. RWAs, real world assets, these are all things that have been blowing up really big on chain when we're talking about Ethereum. And I do firmly believe that this is just the very beginning of this cycle. We're still below these all-time highs, guys, and we can look in every single one of our prior cycles that any single time that we were below those prior all-time highs, it was a good time to buy, even if you bought at those all-time highs, because we know that even as small as the last cycle was, Ethereum still made this massive move. And if we have anything like 2017, where this cycle just massively outperforms in comparison to what people's biggest expectations are, I think that we have to do our due diligence by at least just being prepared for this cycle, since it does have a lot more of I would say, a fundamental driver of value than ever before with the institutions. The institutions are going to need retail, and retail is going to pump the ever-living crap out of a lot of these cryptos. I honestly think that this next run up coming for Ethereum could very easily be taking us upwards into the 10K levels. You know, we might just be seeing steady higher highs and higher lows, not really too many pullbacks, as we just venture closer and closer towards a parabolic top taking place at the end of 2025. That's what I've personally been believing is going to end up playing out, and this is the way that I think that the entire cycle will kind of shape up. Obviously, you can't predict every single thing. There's going to be variances in the way that the structure lines up. However, when we're talking about level to level, when we end up breaking this all-time high, I think that we'll make a decent move into price discovery. We'll pull back. You know, we don't have to retest it perfectly, but we could pull back somewhere down in here. And then we're just going to continue to see, you know, your average higher highs and higher lows as the market cycle heats up and goes into somewhat of a parabolic top. So it doesn't matter what cycle you're looking at, every uptrend is similar. It's higher highs and higher lows. So however the short-term price action varies inside of that same sort of trend, it doesn't change anything for me. I still believe that we're looking at the end of the year 2025 as our true cycle top. It's just that this cycle is going to be much more parabolic. So with that being said, guys, I wanted to jump into some of my favorite altcoins, the ecosystems that I think are going to do the best when Ethereum takes off. You know, Ethereum is, in my opinion, relatively overpriced. Even though we're going to see this big upswing, there's still better opportunities. And I wanted to break down some of my favorite picks, some that I'm personally invested in that I think you guys should definitely be watching moving forward from here. When you're looking at all of these in the top 10, for the most part, not a lot of these have changed. The thing that has changed is mainly Coinbase and Blast. But for the most part, all of these other ones have kind of stayed inside of this top 10. Optimism used to be somewhere higher inside of like the top 6, 7, even top 5 at one point. right? But it's kind of fallen back a little bit behind. But for the most part, a lot of these are layer 2s, right? Almost all of these are layer 2s of some kind. Tron and BSC are their own layer 1. Same thing with Solana. But when we're talking Arbitrum, Blast, Coinbase, Polygon, and even some of these other ones down in here, a lot of these are going to be layer 2s. And so we're looking at a combination of people trying to compete against Ethereum, building their own layer 1 ecosystems, or we're looking at other people that are ultimately trying to add on to Ethereum and create these layer 2s. And I firmly believe that because when we're looking at how much TVL is dominated by Ethereum, I think that the best advantage is the ones that are just simply trying to add and enhance what Ethereum already is. Ethereum has its issues, everybody knows this, and that's why I think that because so much of the money is already consolidated here, we're going to continue to see a lot of the projects that are just simply adding to Ethereum outperform in the short term. So when I'm looking at the first one on the list, we're looking at Arbitrum. And I'm not necessarily telling you guys that you need to go out and buy Arbitrum token, because this is just a governance token. It was airdropped. There's a lot of venture capitalists holding it. I hold mine just from what I got in the airdrop, and I'm just going to plan to hold that. I'm not planning on, doing anything with it besides just holding what I got in that airdrop. I haven't bought any more. Now, the big thing when we're watching this chart is understanding that all we've really done is just made our listing pump. We made that retrace like most of these will do. And then all we've done from that is made our secondary impulse. You could draw this a couple different ways. I look at this being 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we had this overextended wave 5. And the reason why our correction was so gnarly was because we made an overextension inside of that wave 5. So we saw this big reversion all the way back down, almost fully retraced the move. But when I look at this chart, I honestly think that this thing is just setting up. Looks like it's rounding out. In the shorter time frames, this is just our first little subwave. We saw 5 waves up, which I'm going to make these smaller. So we saw 5 waves up. This is just going to be a 1-wave impulse, and I think that we're going to make our next move coming all the way back up to about $1.70. See a little pullback before we make a run all the way back up to the top of this wave B, or at least close to. I'm honestly expecting that this thing's going to go into a brand new all-time high. And when we zoom out, the cool thing about Arbitrum is this is one of my favorite setups where we have a wave 1 and a wave 2. And now we're getting ready for a much bigger move, right? This is a wave 3 impulse. So all we've completed down in here was wave 1 of 3, wave 2 of 3. We're getting ready for wave 3 of 3. We'll have wave 4 of 3. Then we'll have another wave 5, and then that will only complete this wave 3. We'll have a correction in here. And then we still have a whole nother wave 5 to go with a brand new set of subwaves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to go inside of that. So when I'm looking at Arbitrum, all we're doing is just completing those early subwaves, these beginning impulses below those prior all-time highs, because the next moves coming are going to be expansion. They're going to be price discovery. And so it's not necessarily that I'm telling you we need to go out and buy the Arbitrum token, even though I think that this thing is going to massively outperform a lot of stuff. I think it will do good. I think that there's better opportunities buying tokens built inside of the Arbitrum ecosystem, because they're ultimately going to see the most value, the most upside. So the first one on today's video is going to be GMX. And GMX is one that I've talked a lot about for a long time. And this is one that I don't think anybody should be overlooking, because in the same way that we just looked at Arbitrum having these stacking 1 waves, getting ready for this big expansive move, GMX is ultimately just following the Arbitrum chart. All we're seeing here, this first cycle was a wave 1, and this is beginning a much bigger impulse, right? This is wave 1 of 1. So this most recent move that we just made over here was wave 1 and wave 2 of 3. So we're getting ready for that big move into price discovery. And that's firmly what I believe is coming next. We can look at these. I'm going to draw the waves so you guys can actually see what the heck we're looking at here. But big picture, all these are just the early subwaves. This is a wave 1. This is a wave 1 of 3. So we're going to get the next move coming based off of Fibonacci. We can get price targets from these. We'd be looking at a minimum target of $155. So on the minimum, I think that that's where we're headed in this next move. But most likely, we're going to be ending up at the 2618, because that's generally where you're going to see a lot of these 3 waves go. So that would be closer to like $235. We'd see some type of 4-wave correction, but then we still have a whole nother wave to come after that. And so I'm not going to be the least bit surprised to see GMX just kind of dwarf all of these fib extensions and just makes this big move into price discovery. And so when I map out Elliott waves, I'm not trying to give you guys specific price targets. It's mainly just to share with you guys how in the beginning of trends, you're going to see these very beginning subwaves, just these little impulses and these big corrections. They're not really doing that much, but they are steadily making higher highs and higher lows. And then out of nowhere, they're just going to start teleporting into new all-time highs and make these massive breakouts. I've seen it so many times, and if you end up making an investment into some of those really good outperforming altcoins, every single time you buy those, they just go straight into a new all-time high, and everything is just kind of like, well, when do I take my profit? I don't know. I don't have a reference point anymore. And that's exactly where we want to be. These cycles that have only just been around for the last couple years, and specifically with Arbitrum only ever being fresh to these, mainly this cycle is when it started to get hype. I honestly think that GMX being the lead DEX over there, and this is a DEX for trading perpetual futures and stuff. So when we're looking at something that could see a lot of adoption, I think that a lot of people are going to be ultimately trading on DEXs, especially for perps, because of the fact all of the centralized exchanges counter trade you and they manipulate the market, and it ultimately just creates a bad experience for everybody. But when we're talking about DEXs, it's all on chain. There's nobody that's going to be really screwing you. Now, one of the really cool things about GMX, as we finished out this correction, all we've done here is basically just completed this big Wyckoff accumulation. I've talked so much about these Wyckoffs because I swear to you guys that if you pay attention to them, they're going to start making a lot of sense, and you'll be able to find them in the market cycles all the time. So when we're looking at GMX, it literally followed one of these perfectly, and the only difference is we just haven't got to that markup yet. And I think that we're about to be making a very big impulse right now. Because inside of these Wyckoffs, you make these three lows. You have low there, you have low there, and then you get the third, and this is the spring-loaded bounce, right? And this is the very ending of the correction. What happens after this is markup, where you see the significant breakup. We clear all the way back above these prior range highs that was resistance, and then we go into new all-time highs from there. So when we're looking at this, I honestly think that we're setting up for one of the bigger breakouts in the Arbitrum ecosystem, and there's more money backing GMX than any of the Arbitrum tokens. And I think that if you're trying to pick one, if you like Arbitrum, if you're bullish on the layer 2 ecosystem as a whole, I would go for GMX, and it's by far my biggest investment in the Arbitrum ecosystem. Now, next up is going to be Optimism, and Optimism is another one that we've been buying and holding in my group for a long time. All of these have been. Layer 2s are something I've got a lot of confidence do well this cycle, and as you guys can see, all we've really done since the beginning of this cycle is maintained higher highs and higher lows. That's what you want to look for in these altcoins. Any altcoin that's going to be able to maintain a solid upward trajectory, even regardless of all of the Bitcoin corrections and whatnot, those are the ones that are going to outperform the most once the real upside of the cycle sets in. Now, we're looking at all of these little impulses and then these corrections back down to the trend. We've seen 3 of them so far. And in my opinion, we're looking at a lot of the same similarities between Arbitrum, where these are just the beginning sort of impulses before we get into a much bigger parabolic move. When I look at the price of Optimism, I honestly think that we're about to start making a very big move to the upside very soon. And the real reason is we've already broken from all descending resistance down in here. We've already broken from that. We're just kind of consolidating outside of it right now. We saw a pretty decent impulse to begin this. 5 waves up, ABC back down. Very similar to Arbitrum, there's not a lot of difference. This one is just going back a little bit further in its cycles. But what we notice here, and kind of the main reason I drew this trend line, notice how we had this big correction, but wave C didn't even retest the very bottom of this trend. What it shows is that we're heating up in a way that we're getting more parabolic. Anytime you see a trend about to go parabolic, it'll eventually distance itself from that main trend, and it'll start making more steeper, I guess you could say, parabolic moves. Notice how this higher high is a much steeper degree of trend versus the very beginning of the one that we've been at since the end of 2022, right? We've seen all of these sort of higher highs and higher lows ultimately coming back down and visiting this long-term trend. Even for as big as the last correction was, we didn't even come back down and retest it. So what it shows is there's enough buy support, there's enough people coming in here at higher levels that it shows the trend is at least steepening. We're going to end up seeing this thing bottom, however that looks, and I honestly think it's going to make a very big move into new all-time highs soon. The difference is we've already spent all of this time, just kind of making this like channel, I guess you could say, right? We see this little channel here. These are what happens right. This is what happens right before you see these massive moves into price discovery that do stuff like this. And I'm not even trying to just hype you guys up. I swear to God, I've seen this happen so many times over my 8 years in crypto that it makes me excited because, I kind of thought that we were going to get that move right here. But the fact that we all got another opportunity to accumulate these back down here at almost the cycle lows is truly mind-boggling because Bitcoin's sitting at almost all-time highs. Many of the other altcoins have already gone into price discovery. Some of these altcoins like the layer 2s, because Ethereum has, lagged a little bit, On-chain altcoins haven't done as much, and I honestly think that the layer 2s themselves are going to outperform everything so much, you can't really look past Arbitrum and Optimism. Those are two of my favorite picks going into this cycle. And if you're looking at what cryptos to buy inside of the ecosystem, Velodrome Finance is going to be the main liquidity layer in DEX built on Optimism, and that's why, you know, when we're looking at the charts, this is the exact same chart. I mean, there's really not a difference here. We're looking at the same chart of Optimism. The only difference is it outperforms it both up and down. When we go down, we actually go down even more than Optimism. And when we go up, we obviously outperform it as well. So when I'm looking at Optimism, I don't really think that there's anything better than looking at Velodrome Finance. It only having $100 million in market cap. It's also listed on Coinbase. So like you guys could buy this if you're an American, you know, just off of their main exchange. And I think that any altcoin on Coinbase that is sub 100 million or even just around that 100 to 200 million dollar threshold, we're going to see a lot of upside in those altcoins. This one is by far going to outperform the majority of the altcoins in the Optimism ecosystem. Not only is it so closely correlated to the liquidity, and that's why it follows the price so identically, but it's going to outperform the price of Optimism. So if you're bullish on the price of Optimism and we think that it's going to do something like this, you know, imagine what this does, having already held better support. You know, we're sitting at higher price points, and it's already outperformed it up to this point at a lower market cap. So I just think that this is probably the best pick if you're looking at what one to buy inside of that ecosystem. We're pretty much sitting right around, I guess you could say, the listing point, because they have a new token, right? We looked at the old chart and it showed prior price history, but they have a new token contract at this point. So that's what we're looking at right here. And all we're doing is just kind of coming back down and consolidating right at that same listing point. So I honestly think we're close to a reversal. Whether it's a little bit lower or not, you know, we pretty much already tagged this level. I find it more likely we're just about to reverse. So if Optimism's going to go up, look no further than Velodrome Finance. Alrighty guys, the next ecosystem we have on today's video and the final ecosystem is going to be Metis. This is another layer 2, and this to me is my favorite layer 2 out of all of them. I'm really bullish on Arbitrum, and I think it's going to already have that first mover's advantage. But when we're talking about a native chain token, I think that Metis is much more needed in its ecosystem, and I think that it's going to outperform all of the other ones because of that. But not only is Metis the token going to do good, and not only is it worth a lot less, you know, sub 500 million in market cap, the upside potential is a lot higher than the other two tokens I just listed. Now, the other two ecosystem tokens are going to be solid. I think you should look into those, both Arbitrum and Optimism. But when we're talking about what's the biggest bargain, I guess you could say, what could potentially give us the most upside, I honestly think it's going to be Metis. Now, Metis has had, in my opinion, one of the best breakouts, and it has one of the best looking charts in all of the cycles. Guys, if we come over here and look at once again, the Wyckoff accumulation, this is the exact setup that Metis did, where we have these 3 lower lows, and then once we get the third low, we make this big breakout to get outside of this range. I mean, it's literally the exact same thing that Metis did right here, where we had a low, high, high, and then we got our third lower low, the spring-loaded bounce, and then what happens right after that? We get the breakout. The difference is Metis is sitting on top of that prior range as new support, right? Metis is massively outperforming. It's seen this big breakout. You know, we were accumulating Metis in my group since all the way back down in these lower parts. We bought Metis a few different times throughout that cycle low. And so now that we've broken out and retested this prior level as new support, it doesn't get much more bullish than that, because now we're just consolidating inside of this bull flag looking thing. Or I guess you could say a pennant. I don't know. I'm not really big into chart patterns necessarily. But regardless, this thing looks bullish, and it does look like we're about to be going up. The cool thing about Metis is we've only ever finished one impulse. We saw 1, 3, and 5 waves to the upside. And then we saw an A, B, and a C. This B wave ended up making a new high, and it was an expanded flat correction. But wave C came right back down flush with that, you know, cycle low. The prior consolidation that we had been at, this range for like 500 or 600 days, we came right back down and landed smack on that as new support. So that's exactly what you want to see in something that's going to outperform. I still think that this thing is, you know, a great buy because of the fact this made a third lower low. This wasn't an impulse wave, and this wasn't an impulse wave. This is all a Wyckoff accumulation. So now that we've just broken out of that range and flipped it to support, this was our first impulse, right? It's just this wave 1. So we can look at Fibonacci, and this can give us some targets based off of our minimum targets. We're going to be looking at the 1618. You know, basically the prior all-time highs is our next target for this impulse. this is going to be a wave 1 and a wave 2, wave 3, wave 4, and then we're still going to have another move coming after that. But the thing is, guys, is oftentimes in these wave 3s, they can just go way higher than any of these fib targets. We could see this thing just go instantly into this big move to $1,000+. And I'm not even kidding you guys. I've seen this happen so many times. What it really reminds me of the most, I guess you could make the comparison of Metis, because they had relatively similar valuations at this point. But when we're looking at Metis, they make all of this long-term consolidation, not really doing anything, just kind of going sideways. And then once they start breaking out, a lot of them are just going to make moves like this. Now, I'm not saying that Metis is going to perfectly do that, but I am saying that don't be surprised if once this wave 3 comes in, it does massively outperform all of your biggest expectations. Because the amount of times I've seen a wave 3 blow past all of your Fibonacci targets and extensions is just too many times to count. In fact, if you're buying altcoins and they're not doing that, they're not really the best performing altcoins. And that's why, as long as we're accumulating inside of the beginning impulses, just at the beginning breakouts, we're still way below these prior all-time highs by a lot. We're still at an early point because all we want to do is have our bags ready. So once these big moves start to come in, we're not trying to guess where the top is. We're just simply waiting and letting the cycle do its thing. And Metis is the one that I think is going to outperform the most because Vitalik Buterin's mom is actually the lead developer of this. So because all of these are going to be directly correlated to the price of Ethereum, and because I believe that Ethereum is going to be doing this, I honestly think that the layer 2s themselves are going to outperform basically everything in this cycle. I think layer 2s are the new layer 1s, and that's why a lot of these ecosystems should see more adoption, more upside, because ETH already has the ETF approval. You're now banking that these other layer 1 ecosystems potentially get them, or you just piggyback off of what already has been proven to work, which is Ethereum. And all of these layer 2s that are scaling Ethereum, in my opinion, are just going to do the best. So I honestly think that Metis is going to see some of the most adoption when the Ethereum ecosystem takes off, because because Vitalik's mom is actually the lead dev. And if you're looking at what the heck is the best project to buy in the ecosystem, I really like NetSwap. You're looking at sub $2 million in total market cap. This is basically, one of the top dexes. It's the first original main swap dex. So it's, pretty simple, nothing crazy. But if we're going to end up seeing Metis do really well, I think that the price of this is going to also do really well as a whole. Because if we notice, it looks exactly the same, right? We also followed a Wyckoff. Low, high, third low. And then we see the breakout. The only difference is it just outperforms both to the upside, and then it obviously, drops even harder to the downside. I think it's going to continue to do this when we're talking the long-term cycle. And I really like the Metis ecosystem because we have all of this accumulation that's take place. We have these big breakouts that have already happened, and we're so far below these prior all-time highs that the real upside potential is still yet to become. We're looking at this from where we're at right now. If we were to hit those prior all-time highs, you're talking some life-changing gains, 200x approximately. So that's the type of stuff that I think is insane about these ecosystems, is most people don't even know they exist, right? Nobody even knows what Metis is. Most people aren't even buying the native token of Metis itself. So if Metis is about to make this big move, if the lead developer of Metis is Vitalik Buterin's own mom, I mean, how is that not going to just explode in value? It's actually the only truly decentralized layer 2 out there. It's got the only decentralized sequencer out of all the layer 2s. I really love Metis. If it's going to do all of this, imagine what the tokens built in the ecosystem are going to do as a whole. So I really think that this NetSwap is going to do, whatever the price of Metis is going to do. It's just going to be like leverage trading Metis. This is going to be basically a 3x token of the Metis ecosystem. And with it having new volume coming in here, making this big breakout, as long as Metis goes into a brand new all-time high, and as long as it makes another impulse, we're looking at this thing just following it in price. Both of these just made a one-wave impulse. Both of them have been working on this ABC correction back down, whether that's a little bit lower than where we're at now, or whether it's, the bottom now. If Metis bottoms here and starts going up, I honestly think that this thing is bottoming here and going to go up too. But the difference is, just to our next target, you're talking like 15x. So I think that this thing is going to do really well. Anyways, guys, this is the video I had for you. Wanted to give you guys some great value, talk about why I think that these markets are primed, being Ethereum with the ETFs, being Arbitrum with the layer 2s, You know, GMX being the lead DEX on Arbitrum, Optimism obviously being the next competitor to Arbitrum, another layer 2, and then Velodrome Finance being the lead DEX and liquidity layer over on the Optimism chain. I think this thing is going to do really well. We also talked about Metis and talked a little bit about my favorite token over there being NetSwap, why it's going to outperform everything else. If you found any value in this, guys, please do me a favor, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. If you do want to see how I'm investing, all of these have been prior signals. You know, Metis was something we were accumulating at the bottom, all the way back down in here. NetSwap was something we were accumulating all the way at the very beginning of this cycle, when everything was pretty much at the cycle lows. And so when we're talking about, you know, altcoins that are going to explode, there's still a lot of things that you can buy inside my group. And if you want to see what altcoins I'm buying right now in this dip, links in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. With that being said, thank you so much for the support. I will catch you guys in the next one. As always, peace out.